For the next few days, most of us will see some rain, which could be heavy, and it will be windy too. That's because low pressure is never too far away this week. At the moment, we have an area of low pressure out in the North Sea, and it's this that's brought the heavy persistent rain across eastern northeastern parts today. But that is gradually going to ease away. However, across southern areas, we have a swathe of very wet weather that's pushing its way in. Likely to see a bit of disruption, particularly in the southeast. Could be some flooding, could be some difficulties on the roads as well. For many tonight, it is going to be a little bit chillier than last night, particularly in the west where we have some clear skies. Starting off then on Wednesday, a wet picture in the southeast, particularly as we go through the morning rush hour, but the heaviest rain clearing away as we go through the morning. Cloud and rain then piling in from the North Sea to affect eastern parts of Scotland, perhaps northeast England too, and it's in these places where there are still ongoing issues from the exceptional rain last week, so this isn't going to make the situation any better. For many, temperatures similar to today for most, near normal for the time of year, but some wet weather waiting out in the west. That will then sweep through as we go through overnight into Thursday. Thursday then another unsettled day, many places seeing outbreaks of showery rain and some breezy if not windy conditions too. And to be honest, that's the theme as we go through the rest of the week. It is going to be unsettled. See you later.
Who is it?
We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewberry. Coming up tonight, a 60% threshold should have been applied to the Brexit referendum. So says Chief Brexiteer and now the Northern Ireland Minister, Steve Baker. Do you agree with that? And if so, do you reckon that principle then should apply to any future referendum? Also, what's his motive for suggesting this? I've got my suspicions, but I want to know yours. And within the coming months, about 100 migrant hotel contracts set to be stopped. Good. Common sense for once. Have you seen, though, some of the locations of some of the rumoured hotels to be included? What do you make to this? Is it a cynical ploy to gain votes? Or, as I said, just good old common sense finally prevailing? And get this, 1 million children apparently experienced destitution in the UK last year. What's going on? Who's to blame? And let me ask you this, the whole notion of destitution, what does that even mean to you? And, that's what this name makes me do. Shamima Begum, of course, I'm talking about her. Yet again, back to the Court of Appeals we go. Do you think she should ever be allowed back in this country? Your thoughts on all of that? Yes, a lot to get our teeth into tonight. Keep me company for an hour of the feistiest debates. But before we get into all of that, let's cross live to Polly Middlehurst for tonight's latest headlines.
Michelle, thank you. Good evening to you. Well, Downing Street today confirmed 12 British citizens were killed during the Hamas terror attack in Israel. Another 5 remain missing. And that comes after an 85-year-old Israeli hostage released by Hamas last night described the hell I've been taken into what seemed like a spider web of tunnels under Gaza. Yocheved Lifshitz also said she was treated well and seen by a doctor during her ordeal. Hamas say she was returned along with another female Israeli, Nurit Cooper, on humanitarian grounds. Their husbands, though, are still being held hostage. Well, Yocheved's daughter, Sharon, who's a British citizen, translated her mother's description of her abduction during a news conference earlier.
My mum is saying that she was taken on the back of a motorbike with her body, with her legs on one side and her head on another side. That she was taken through the ploughed fields with a man in front on one side and a man behind her, and that while she was being taken, she was hit by sticks by Shabab. Yeah, Shabab people. Until they reached the tunnels. There they walked for a few kilometers on the wet ground. There are a huge network of tunnels underneath. It looks like a spider web.
Well, in a new development this evening, the Israeli Security Agency has released footage of interviews with captured Hamas fighters. One of them says they were promised huge rewards for capturing hostages during their attack on Israel on October the 7th.
In Gaza, whoever brings the kidnaps gets a bonus.
How much is the bonus they give?
An apartment and $10,000.
For each person captured?
Yes.
Who told you this?
That's how it works in El Qassam Brigade.
The commander told you this?
Yes, the company commander.
For each captured, you get an apartment?
Yes, because they wanted as many kidnapped as possible. The goal of our infiltration for them was to capture and kidnap as many as we could.
Well, that comes as central Israel has faced its largest rocket barrage since the attacks of October the 7th. Local media is reporting tonight that multiple rockets fired from Gaza were successfully intercepted over Tel Aviv. And that's after Israel's Prime Minister said Hamas must be destroyed at the same time, warning the war may take some time. In addition to that, the Palestinian Health Ministry has said today more than 700 people were killed in the last 24 hours, bringing their total to nearly 5,800. Israel's Prime Minister has also said today, after the war, though, no one will live under the tyranny of Hamas.
We're doing everything we need to do to destroy Hamas in Gaza. We will dismantle its terror machine. We will dismantle its political structure. We will make every effort to release our hostages, and we'll make every effort to keep Palestinian civilians out of harm's way, it's important to understand Hamas is committing a double war crime. It's not only murdering our civilians, targeting our civilians, doing unspeakable war crimes. They're also hiding behind civilians, their own civilians.
Benjamin Netanyahu speaking there. Now, in news here at home, the number of hotels being used by the government to house asylum seekers is now being reduced. The Immigration Minister confirmed today 50 will be exited, their words, by January, and that process will begin in the coming days. The government hopes the move will alleviate some of the public anger over the small boat crisis and the daily cost of hotels, which has hit £8 million a day. Robert Jenrick spoke in the Commons earlier on.
These hotels should be assets for their local communities, serving businesses and tourists, hosting the life events that we treasure like weddings and birthdays, not housing illegal migrants at unsustainable cost to the taxpayer. So we took immediate action a year ago to reduce our reliance on hotels. We significantly increased the amount of dispersed accommodation and have increased funding for local councils. We reformed the management of the existing estate.
Robert Jenrick. Now, a man who died after his car was swept away in water near Aberdeenshire during Storm Barbet has been named as Peter Pelling. Meanwhile, 2 women who died in a crash have also been named by police today, Cheryl Woods and Sarah Smith from Caerphilly. The mother and daughter were involved in a 5-vehicle collision on the M4 last Friday. Well, the Met Office is warning of more bad weather to come this evening, with a yellow weather warning now in place, an alert for heavy rain, and that's been issued for the southeast of England from now until 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. We'll keep you up to date on the effects of possible flooding across the UK on that one right here, GB News. Across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. This is GB News, Britain's news channel. Thanks for that, Polly. I'm Michelle Dewberry with you till 7 o'clock tonight, alongside Peter Lane, Communications Officer at the Institute for Economic Affairs, Reem Ibrahim, and the former editor of Labelist, Peter Edwards. Good evening to both of you. You know the drill, don't you, as well, on this programme. It's very much about you guys at home as well. What is on your mind tonight? I like to involve you, so get your thoughts and feelings on all the topics coming in GB Views at gbnews.com. I'll tell you what I really like as well. If you ever hear things from the panel that you agree with or you disagree with, or you're thinking, hang on a second, why is Michelle not asking them this? Well, tell me, because I do like nothing more than putting your questions directly to the panel, so get involved in my programme tonight. Anyway, top story you've just been hearing as well, the Tory Brexiteer, quite a prominent Brexiteer, many of you will remember, of course, Steve Baker. He has claimed now that perhaps Brexit should not have been allowed to happen the way it did. I mean, we're all familiar by now with the statistics, aren't we? 48 versus 52. He is suggesting, looking back all misty-eyed with hindsight, saying perhaps there should have been a super majority, so-called, of 60% in order for it to have passed. What do you make to that? And also, if you are someone that's shouting yes at your television set, does that mean then that for every future referendum, 60% is the threshold? You tell me. Reem, what's your thoughts on it all?
Yeah, so I suspect that Steve Baker sort of said this as a result of his opinions on the Constitution. He sort of believes, I think, in democracy and believes that ultimately individuals should be able to make those choices themselves. He is, however, very much so understood about the impacts of Brexit and the positive impacts of Brexit. Ultimately, Brexit has allowed us to open up to freer trade. We have non-tariff and no quotas with trade with the EU, and much to the OBR's surprise, actually, Brexit has actually resulted in and yielded some very positive impacts. Constitutionally, I don't think that we should be saying that we need a supermajority in referendums. Ultimately, what that would mean is with the Brexit referendum, it would favour Remain. And we didn't have this kind of referendum when we entered into the Lisbon Treaty. I don't think that we need to be requiring 2/3 of the country to agree with something. I think we just need a simple majority.
Yeah, and I mean, it's interesting that you say that it wouldn't have happened, because it wouldn't have happened with the turnout and the votes the way that they were. But I would be intrigued if people knew, right, it's 60% turnout, perhaps some of those stay-at-home voters, they might have been more compelled to turn out, and maybe that 60% may have been reached. Who knows? Hindsight is a wonderful, fascinating thing. Where are you on it, Peter?
With Steve Baker, for those who don't know him, he was one of the chief instigators for successive prime ministers, causing them problem after problem, prime ministers on his own side. Now, he's also someone who talks openly about his Christian faith, which is quite unusual, and he's shown moments of regret about how much he pushed his government and how hard and how many splits he caused with some very tough rhetoric. So he's very honest in some ways, but in other ways, you have to look why he's suggesting this now. When the Brexit cause has won the Brexit vote, it potentially locks it in for generations, makes it harder for those on the opposing side to have another referendum and win it. So I credit him for candour, but you have to look under the bonnet as to why he's suggesting this.
So your suspicion is that you think perhaps if there were to be a rejoin EU referendum, you'd think then that people would then be arguing for the threshold to be higher?
Yeah, I'm not predicting that and I'm not demanding that, but I keep saying, I think we've had two referenda about 40 years apart, so there might be another one in my lifetime, but I don't think we're talking about something that's going to happen in the next decade.
Yeah, and of course he's the Northern Ireland minister now, so people are talking about potential, should there ever be a referendum when it comes to, say, Irish unification, would then a supermajority need to be imposed on that if this is the thing that Steve Baker is suggesting now?
Yeah, I mean, as a Northern Ireland minister over the past year, he has overseen some of the most difficult sort of relations within Northern Ireland. He's overseen the way in which the implementation of that deal, of this Brexit deal, has occurred. In many ways, giving Northern Ireland this kind of uncertainty over the past few years has been a very, very difficult decision for the government, one that I didn't support. I do think that Steve has sort of seen that as a result of his time as a junior minister and also overseen these kind of relationships be overseen. I do think, however, when it comes to supermajorities, effectively what that would do is it would favour the existing rule. So because we were in the European Union, requiring a supermajority favours Remain, and I think that's wrong.
Do you? We had conversations, there was a couple of by-elections, as most people remember, a few days ago, and there was lots of talk about turnout. Not only turnout, one of the seats at least was won with like a third of the vote or something, and some of my viewers, and I think even one or two of my panel members since then have suggested, could there be like a threshold when it comes to, you've got these by-elections, and if really most of the people, are staying at home, not even bothering to turn out, should that election therefore be null and void? So these thresholds, we're talking about them with referendums. What about by-elections or even general elections?
I'm very sceptical about that because I think any reform that makes it harder for electors to have their voices heard would be hard to justify and it'd be very unpopular. And I know you're not necessarily suggesting this, but look at America. I think it was a 2000 general election, and obviously American elections are more complex, where you have districts and states and vote and so on, and then their votes are added together, not in the millions, but in smaller numbers, as part of this weird coalition of counting. But the 2000 election between Al Gore and George Bush Jr. was ultimately decided in the courts. And first past the post in Britain has many problems, but it is simple, it is easy to exercise, easy to participate and easy to decide.
Yeah, I mean, Peter, you're one of my viewers already. You got in and suggested applying that rule over to the general election. How would you enforce that? I'm always fascinated when people say, let's apply, whether it's a turnout threshold or a minimum vote threshold or whatever. How would you apply that? So many people out there, they are politically disengaged, and I would blame the state of politics for that rather than anything to do personally with those voters. So how would you get them out? How would you incentivise them or force them, or whatever the word is, to get to that ballot box? You tell me.
Well, in Australia, they have compulsory voting.
They do indeed.
So I think it's interesting. It obviously has been implemented in other countries. I don't think that's right. I don't think it's morally right to force people to a ballot box.
And it's enforced there with a fine, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yes, it's enforced with a fine. I'm not sure what the exact amount is, but I think ultimately, I think that's immoral. I think forcing people to the ballot box is immoral. I think you're absolutely right. I actually think that people feel apathetic because of the state of politics currently. We haven't got a lot of choice. choice. I mean, there isn't a huge amount of difference between the Labour Party and the Conservative Party at the moment. The Conservatives have overseen the highest tax burden since the Second World War. So really, if you are a voter and you're going to tick blue or tick red, there isn't a huge difference.
Well, yeah, and I have to say, I hear that coming through time and time again from the viewers at home as well. I am really uncomfortable with this notion of, Michelle, you better get yourself to that ballot box and you better, even if you tick none of the above or spoil your ballot paper, you better, or else I'll be taking some of your wages off you. I hate that principle because I think, as I've just been saying, if you want me, because no one's entitled to be voted for. If you want me to get up, get off my chair, get out in the rain and put my cross in somebody's box or draw whatever on the paper, you've got to engage me as politicians. You've got to galvanise me. You've got to work for that vote. You've got to connect to me. You don't just come up with a massive stick and batter my bank balance and make me go out there and do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think in Australia, Reem was correct to call it compulsory voting, but I think what it actually is compulsory attendance. So as long as you turn up, you can still write none of the above on your ballot paper.
But do you
draw a pretty picture.
Do you agree with that?
I'm really sceptical about it because I think I don't think it's hitting people with a big stick, but it's forcing them to do something.
Taking money off them if they don't comply. That's a stick.
Well, it's more nuanced than that because people can turn up and write none of the above. But obviously, I'm not really that keen, full stop, on forcing people to do things unless it's to prevent a harm to someone else, and not voting doesn't involve a harm for other people. So the other thing is, it'll never happen because none of the mainstream parties in Britain are going to write down the manifesto, we want more state control over your ordinary lives in such a
Well, you say that.
Compulsory voting.
You say that. I mean, look at the way, the policies that have just been announced over the past few weeks. We're seeing a ban on smoking for the next generation. We're seeing governments continuously intervene in our lives constantly. I share your sentiment. I don't want to see the government intervening in our lives in this way. But I don't think that the government are scared to. Look at the lockdowns. Look at the way in which the government have always intervened in our lives.
If I may, I think you're being very cheeky comparing voting to smoking. I mean, there's no benefit to smoking, full stop.
Absolutely there is. There are many, many people that see incredible amounts of benefits as a result of smoking. Now, smoking is bad for your health. Well, smoking is bad for your health, but many people enjoy it. Many people enjoy smoking, and I don't think that we should shy away from that. I'm not advocating for people to smoke. What I am saying is that people should be able to choose.
Well, are you a smoker? Is it one of your small pleasures in life? I'm interested to hear from that. Lots of you, well, particularly on my Twitter, you're not having any of it. Jan says Steve Baker needs to wind his neck in. A lot of MPs win elections by the slimmest of majorities. Rob says, Michelle, can you just call this what it is? Baker just trying to appeal to what you're calling the Ramonas at the next general election. Cool, blimey. Keep me informed as to what you're thinking on that topic. GBViews at gbnews.com. Another one that I found fascinating, and I know you will too. These migrant hotels, finally, it looks likely that some of those contracts are set to be finished. Common sense, or again, political manipulation? And when we come up to a general election, you tell me.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, Michelle Dewberry till 7 o'clock tonight. Communications Officer at the Institute for Economic Affairs, Reem Ibrahim, and the former editor of Labour List, Peter Edwards, alongside me. Lots still to come. Honestly, even just this name, it makes me shudder. Shamima Begum, of course, I'm talking about her before the end of the programme, back in court. Should she ever be allowed in this country? Something tells me there'll be strong opinions on that with you guys at home. But look, I want to talk to you about migrant hotels. The government is set to end contracts with up to about 100 hotels that are hosting these migrants. The majority of these, so we're led to believe, will be in the key battleground seats when it comes to the next general election. So, of course, any right-thinking individual would think it's basic common sense that these hotels are finally being wound down. I mean, why? We've had Channel crossing people in 4-star hotels in this country. It is literally, it beggars belief, but there we are. So is this basic common sense, or is it a little bit of cynical electioneering now, closing these?
I do think it's electioneering, but what's particularly interesting is by ending, so they're looking at ending the use of about 100 migrant hotels. The reason why they're doing this is because they're very aware of the cultural impact that these migrants being housed in these hotels actually has to local communities. I mean, we've seen the videos, we've seen the way in which these migrants are sort of stuffed and packed into these hotels in very, very sort of untampered with, dare I say, areas. And ultimately what this is doing is it's the government saying, no, we hear you, we hear the cultural impact that this is having, we're going to end it. But my question is...
They've not been listening very loud, because people have been saying this for, God knows how long.
And that's why they're doing it. They're absolutely doing it for the election. But my question is, where are these people going to go? Because the asylum backlog has already increased from 100,000 last summer to over 170,000 this year. Where are these people going to go? And what are the Home Office doing? Why are they not getting off and actually doing those things and actually processing those applications? Because ultimately, whilst these people are here in limbo, they're not going to be deported and they're just going to be staying here twiddling their thumbs.
I can sense where you're going. You're going to be one of those people that tell me that they should be allowed to work.
I do think they should be allowed to work. I would prefer that the applications are processed and done very quickly, but clearly that's not the case at the moment. I'd rather them not take our taxpayer money, actually let them work. There are plenty of vacancies available, especially in the gig economy. Deliveroo, there was actually some reports recently that some people had been, some of these people on the asylum backlog had been illegally working for the gig economy as well.
There's something in the air, because so many people seem to be suggesting that when they're coming on my panel these days about letting people work. And I always throw it open to you guys at home for the final say on it. But Peter, your thoughts on these hotels?
Well, it's about 12%, the Labour Party said, about 12% are being closed. So actually a great chunk of them, the majority, are not being closed. And the Times newspaper, which is not particularly a cheerleader for the Labour Party, said exactly what you said, that the hotels being picked are in election battlegrounds or swing seats. So that, I think, allows one to be a little bit cynical about the motivations on it. But let's zoom out from that, which is we're spending about £8 million a day on hotels. Robert Jenrick, who is a Conservative immigration minister defending his own government, says the government policy is unacceptable.
Yeah, I've got a tiny little clip of him, actually, I think, in the Commons today. I can play that.
These hotels should be assets for their local communities, serving businesses and tourists, hosting the life events that we treasure like weddings and birthdays, not housing illegal migrants at unsustainable cost to the taxpayer. So we took immediate action a year ago to reduce our reliance on hotels. We significantly increased the amount of dispersed accommodation and have increased funding for local councils. We reformed the management of the existing estate.
Sometimes when I hear Tories speaking, I do sometimes think, am I in some like weird parallel universe when they say, you know, these hotels, these beautiful 4-star country hotels should be assets of the local community? I feel like saying, but you guys...
It's your policy.
...ensured that they were not. You guys ensured that those beautiful hotels, the weddings of which you speak, the christenings of which you speak, have all have been cancelled and all the rest of it. It was you guys that did that. Honestly, sometimes I think, am I just living in some strange parallel universe? But anyway.
It's particularly interesting, especially with 13 years of Conservative government, when the Conservative government, so to speak, are complaining about the current situation. It's like, well, who's been in power? It has been you guys. I do think that when it comes, you know, across the board with regard to migration, it's been a very, very difficult situation for the government themselves. The Home Office civil servants have resulted in some resistance as well.
And credit where it is due to the Tories, right? Because they have been trying to put people, whether it's on places like the Bibi Stockholm or whatever, send them over to Rwanda, and every single time they try and get away from the policy of the hotels to do things like just discuss, it is people from the left that immediately start crying about human rights, start crying about floating prisons and all the rest of it, and they scupper the Tories at each corner.
Well, you used the phrase parallel reality, and I thought that when I heard Jenrick say immediate action on your VT just now, when the first big migrant crisis in recent times was 2016, so 7 years is his definition of immediate. In terms of Bibi Stockholm, which I think was a disastrous policy implemented disastrously...
What disastrous about? It was very sensible.
It's not happening. It wasn't lefty lawyers, me, Keir Starmer, the Woke Brigade or anyone else. It was public safety inspectors and the fire brigade that said everyone's going to have to come off Bibi Stockholm.
Well, it was Legionella or whatever it was that they found, wasn't it? And this is the thing, sometimes I want to shake people because I think surely, before you board people... I mean, I confess...
You would have checked it.
I do confess. I know nothing about U-bends or whatever and the testing that goes on, but surely it is very simple that you make sure that all your checks are done and complete and that you have the results back before you load people on to that accommodation, especially in this time of intense scrutiny. So sometimes I don't know who are making these kind of decisions and who is advising people, but sometimes I do just want to go in and shake them all and say, what are you doing?
I mean, really, it's a perfect example of government failure, isn't it?
Well, yeah, and Alan's saying, echoing your point, Reem, where are you going to put people then? Well, often people will be talking about you've got all of those protests now at Scampton and all the rest of it, because the other flip side of this is let's just parachute 2,000 of these people onto these bases. Yes, some people say that live absolutely miles away, but if you lived next door to one of those said mass accommodations, would you still think it's a good idea? I bet you wouldn't if you looked in the mirror and were honest.
And there are airborne diseases at Manchester as well. So do you want Legionella on a prison ship or scabies in Scampton?
Oh, prison ship. I'm not going to write. It's not a prison ship. But look, do you know what? That conversation, as always, will rumble on and on. 1 million UK children, apparently, were destitute last year. What does that even mean? I'll see you in 2.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new
It's
teeth.
your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Dewbs & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the dinosaur hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these 3.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Hi there, Michelle Dewberry with you till 7 o'clock, Communications Officer at the Institute for Economic Affairs, Reem Ibrahim, and the former editor of Labellist, Pete Edwards, alongside me. I want to talk to you about what is destitution in this day and age, but also before the end of the programme, Shamima Begum. Goodness gracious me, that name alone just makes me go, ugh. Anyway, should she ever be allowed back into the UK with that citizenship restored? Get in touch with your thoughts on that. But for now, more than 1 million children in this country apparently did indeed experience destitution last year. This is a new study which has basically found that these so-called rates have doubled, more than doubled actually, in the last 5 years, apparently, a combination of benefit cuts and a cost of living crisis. I shall start with you on this one, Reem.
Yeah, so I think it's interesting with the way that they define destitution, because ultimately we're talking about them arguing that there's been an increase. Now, this year, my colleague at the IEA, Christopher Snowdon, had won a bet with a notorious left-wing academic, Jonathan Portes, where effectively, I think it was about 5 years ago, Jonathan said that child poverty was going to go up.
Right.
Chris said, I don't think that's going to be the case, and they bet, I think it was over £1,000 on this argument.
Why do people place bets on how poor kids are? That seems weird to me.
Because it's about the statistics, and he's basically saying that child poverty is going to significantly increase. It didn't. It went down. It went down to 29%. So it's interesting that these statistics are sort of in line with that. Child poverty has been in decline over the past few years. It's been in decline as a result of the fantastic products that the free market have been able to provide. Effectively, it's meant that actually a lot of those individuals have been able to develop those products and obviously mean that it's much cheaper for those families. Now, of course, there are many, many families that are facing horrible, horrible situations at the moment. The cost of living crisis is impacting people. But overall, in the wider trajectory, children are much better off now than they were 10 years ago or 20 years ago or 30 years ago.
Do you agree with that?
No, and it shows you can often find a statistic to back up any statement, however outlandish. I mean, I think the cost of living crisis does not come out of nowhere. Of course, there are some international factors like the awful war in Ukraine. There's also government policy decisions. We know that the Tories have consistently not uprated benefits in line with inflation. And I look back at one stat today. So the Resolution Foundation, a think tank, said since 2010, the real value of benefits for people out of work has gone down by about 10%. So if you're a household where the main breadwinner, man or woman, is out of work, you are worse off as a result of the last 12 or 13 years. And, you know, there's always been poor people in society, and, you know, I've done voluntary work around the UK, and it's even in the blue times there are poor people, but it is getting worse now, and we're talking about children being destitute, which is lacking food, energy, and toiletries.
So the definition here that they're using means that families cannot afford to adequately feed, clothe or clean their children or keep them warm. Now, I don't want to become one of those weird old people that looks back all misty-eyed, but I do remember when I was a child, and I'm not going to do the smallest violins and woe is me, but I was packed in a bedroom with my siblings, my bed, I'd got the short straw, I was in the bay window. I used to wake up with all these fluffy blankets we used to have, and the net curtains were iced to the window. There was certainly no heating. You used to pull the net curtains off and all the patterns was iced onto the windows. My mum frequently went without food in order so that us kids could eat. And it was just kind of the way it was. I would never describe my childhood as being one of destitution and, you know, all the rest of it. And now, I just don't know if... Is it a case now where so many people just think, you know what, we do have now these rights to these increased living standards, and if we don't get them, then something, somewhere, someone is to blame for that? Am I missing something?
Well, I think someone is partially to blame, which is the government, but I don't want to keep hammering on about party politics.
Well, let's talk about the government then, because one of the candidates, I'm just looking at the Tamworth by-election, Andrew Cooper, he apparently got into a bit of trouble because he shared something on Facebook, the premise of which was somewhere along the lines with some kind of graphic which said, can you feed your kids? It was then a graphic that says, do you have TV or Sky? Do you have a phone contract? And all the rest of it. And I think the point
he was absolutely
making,
right.
Oh.
I think he's absolutely right. I mean, so the graphic that he shared on Facebook, sorry to interrupt, is that he effectively said that if you can afford a phone, if you can afford a TV, then you can afford to feed your children. And I do think there's an element of complacency here. Now, I don't want to take away from the fact that there are many, many people that are really, really struggling in this country, but there are absolutely too many people on benefits in this country. There are 5.3 million people on out-of-work benefits. And I think that Peter's absolutely right. The amount that those individuals receive is nothing, and of course it's going to be horribly hard to be able to live on that amount in the current climate. But in the wider scheme of things, that money is not being used effectively, and when we're counting up the amount of people that are currently on out-of-work benefits, it is far too many.
What do you make to that notion that if you've got a telly and if you've got Sky or whatever it is you've got, then essentially you're not prioritising right as opposed to being truly poor?
I thought it was madness and really offensive, and the Tory candidate...
What's madness about it?
...in Tamworth. Well, first of all, he seemed to lack any real experience of being a parent, especially a single parent in tough circumstances, and also how much things cost. I mean, I think my television, however old it is, cost £100, and the idea that people on benefits are kind of frittering away vast sums on household luxuries is not true. And if you're a single parent, for example, you can't be with your child 24 hours a day. If you need to have a shower or do cooking, you go out of the room. There is nothing at all. In fact, it's a positive if you're a parent having a TV, and not all TV is rubbish. It's completely reasonable. And I think the other reason why I dislike the graphic tweeted by this Tory candidate or put on Facebook was because it's not just wrong, but it was moral judgment as well. Looking down at people for being poor and calling them stupid.
I don't think he was calling them stupid. I think what he was saying is that at the moment, and I genuinely do believe this to be true, at the moment, far too many people believe that they have some kind of right to other people's money. And I don't think that's fair at all. Now, again, I want to preface this. There are clearly people struggling in this country, but there are also far too many people that expect the government to give them money, expect the government to provide them with the means to live. And ultimately, actually, the fact that we currently have 5.3 million people on out-of-work benefits of working age. This is absolutely outrageous. Again, many of those people probably need to. Many of those people probably have very, very good reasons not to be able to work. But I guarantee you there are many people that don't. And actually, can we be honest? It's a huge waste of human potential. There are people that could be contributing to society, that could be contributing to the economy, that could be productive and earning more money and earning more money for their children and for their families and living incredibly successful lives, but they're not. And the reason why they're not is because the government system, the way that the incentives have been set up, the system is against them. And I actually think that we need to be encouraging those people to get back into work and actually fulfilling that human potential.
Carol, she's been in touch saying the sad fact of reality is, can anyone survive without a mobile phone these days? I think not. Well, I think you can. Can you survive without a mobile phone? Of course you can. What am I missing?
I think it's much, much harder because the state, for quite understandable reasons, but the state has pushed people into interacting via websites and smartphones for things like GP appointments, government gateway, registering your entitlements to social security. And I think that goes exactly to the point I'm making and against what Reem says, which is there are certain basic things in life you need, however poor you are. And I think a mobile phone has become one of those in a way it wasn't 30 years ago. And it's not largesse or profligacy to have a mobile phone or a TV.
I totally disagree. One of my colleagues is in his 60s. He still to this day does not have a mobile phone. He comes into the office every morning, leaves at the end of the day, and if we need him, we just go and talk to him.
Has he got school-aged children?
He does not have children, no. Well, I actually don't know, sorry. I don't know if he has children. But all I can say is that he is an adult that works in London that doesn't have a mobile phone because he's actually kind of against them. I think he doesn't really like using them. I think as a company, we did actually buy him a mobile phone and he lost it. Many people live without mobile phones.
Or many people, like my mum's partner who will be watching this, hello, Michael, they're forced to have mobile phones by their families and they don't grasp the concept of them. They don't realise that you take these things out with you whenever you try and get hold of some people on their mobile phones. They're just on the kitchen side. What is the point in that? I want to know your thoughts on that because it's such an interesting conversation. Where do you stand on that whole notion of poverty? GBviews at gbnews.com. Do not go anywhere. I'll be bringing your responses into that. Also, though, Shamima Begum, should she be allowed back to the UK?
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the dinosaur hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
delicious?
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, Michelle Dewberry here till 7. The Communications Officer at the Institute for Economic Affairs, Reem Ibrahim, alongside me, as is the former editor of Labellist, Peter Edwards. Called Blimey, I put the cat amongst the pigeons in the brick. I just posed a casual question to my panel, which really got them talking. Maybe I need to have this debate a different day. I just asked the question, if indeed someone is in poverty and has to live on benefits or whatever, should that be a factor when deciding whether or not to have more children? That created quite an interesting debate, maybe one for another day. Your thoughts on some of that stuff, though, get them coming in. Really not a lot of sympathy and love for the migrant hotels. Babs, I think it is, in Leeds, you sent a really interesting one, and your daughter had a bridal business, which she's now sadly had to close because all of the hotels in that area that were doing those big bridal wedding events, of course, that business stopped. So you see, there is quite a big knock-on effect to some of this stuff. Darren says, when talking about poverty, the fact of the matter is, Michelle, there are many people who simply do not want to go out and work. Philip says, your guest is right. I don't know which one you mean, Philip. iPhone, Sky, smoking and etc. How can you do that whilst pleading poverty? People's priority should always be simple basics, food and shelter and all the rest of it first. Gary says, there's no destitution in this country whatsoever. Some of the facts and stats, though, would say otherwise. Alex says, speaking as a single parent, there are too many people who think that they are owed by the taxpayers. If you incentivise people to stay at home and not have to work, then many people will indeed choose to do that. Steve says, my message is very simple. Can everyone please just stop being lazy? I think many people would actually say, I mean, I do have to say as well, lots of people, their circumstances change in life, don't they? Maybe they'll have a family, they might be married, and heaven forbid their partner, their spouse might very sadly die. And now you're left, you've got children to care for, you can't go out to work, and circumstances do change. I do believe that we should have a safety net for anyone who truly needs it, but there is, of course, always that conversation about whether or not it's used by people that perhaps don't. Now, let me talk to you about a name you'll all be familiar with, Shamima Begum. Remember her? How would you ever forget, quite frankly? 24 she is now. Her legal challenge, it's all about whether or not she should have citizenship and be able to return back to the UK. That is set to reach the Court of Appeal now. A 3-day trial apparently is looming. Should Shamima Begum be allowed to be let back in?
So I think this is interesting. I think that Shamima Begum is a horrible individual. I think she's a criminal. I think she's a traitor to this country. However, she is a British criminal, and I think it's very, very important that we don't start using taking away somebody's citizenship and making them stateless as a reason for as a crime, as a punishment, for a crime. The reason why I think this is important is if person A, British person, their family are British, they've got heritage here for the past 100 years, commits a crime, and I commit a crime, that very same crime, I could have my citizenship removed, even though I'm only British, I only have British citizenship, but my father has Egyptian citizenship. So I have the potential for Egyptian citizenship. I don't have it. This is the reason why Sajid Javid, when he was Home Secretary at the time, was able to remove her citizenship, because she had the potential to gain Bangladeshi citizenship. And I don't think that's right. Effectively, what that means is that I am a second-class citizen, in some respects, to other people who have had heritage here for the last 100, 200 years.
It doesn't mean you're a second-class citizen, it means that actually if you've got the option... I mean, the moral of the story in all of this, everybody, is very basic, is just don't seek to join terrorist organisations that want to destroy the very citizenship that you claim to desperately want to be a part of it. That is the moral of the story. But I don't think it's treating people as second-class citizens. What I think it is, it's using additional options that are available to the government of the day, isn't it, Peter?
I think what Shamima Begum did was utterly wrong and wicked, and the terrible events of the last 2 weeks should remind us daily about the appalling impact of terrorism on so many innocent people around the world. Having said all that, I think Sajid Javid, the then Home Secretary, mishandled this completely, because people that do bad things, as Shamima Begum did, are still entitled to a proper legal process. And in rendering her stateless, because she didn't have another passport of another country, in rendering her stateless, Sajid Javid cowed to parts of the media and the Tory right and deprived her of the right to a fair legal process. So it was a terrible decision, and I can't predict the outcome of the Court of Appeal, but I suspect they'll look very closely at what is the legal basis for rendering someone stateless and depriving them of their legal rights.
Do you think that she should be in this country? Like in your heart, when you look at that individual...
Yeah, I think she should be put on trial in a court in the UK.
I think she should be rotting in a British prison. I think ultimately, Michelle, I mean, who else's problem is she? She went to a British school. She went through the British school system. She grew up with British friends. She grew up in this country. She's a British criminal. If she's not our problem, who else's problem is she?
OK, born and bred, whatever. You go to this school, all the things that you've just mentioned, yet despite all of that, you still thought it was a good idea to join this terrorist organisation that seeks to destroy this country and our way of living. So the fact that you went to school, you got all these British mates and all the rest, I couldn't care less, quite frankly. That just demonstrates to me that despite all that, she still was so anti this country. And what makes me laugh is that many people, well, it doesn't make me laugh, actually, because I actually think it's quite sad. So many people will sit there and say, oh, but she was only a child. She was so innocent and young at 16. How did she know what she was doing? And then in the very next breath, they'll go, yeah, do you see that 16-year-old girl there that reckons that she's now a boy? Yeah, definitely sensible enough to chop their own breasts off and take hormones and all the rest of it.
Well, I think there's a legitimate question to be asked about whether she and other teenagers have been groomed or brainwashed. But that, to me, however important it is not the question before the court. The question is, should a British citizen that does a bad thing be deprived of their legal rights? And I think, say, anyone who believes in justice would say people that do bad things should be put on trial and they should access their legal rights.
Well, she didn't just do a bad thing. She's not like a rampant shoplifter. She did something that was in direct contradiction to the fact that this country... Why would this country want someone in it who wants to blow it up?
Well, we put murderers on trial. We put Irish Republican terrorists on trial. Why should we not put her on trial?
What do you guys think to this at home? Really interested. William says she should never be allowed to return to the UK again for any reason. Andrew has the exact same view. It's an absolute out-and-out no for her. Sue says, the minute I heard you say her name, Michelle, you made my blood boil. Never allow her back in. But Derek says, Michelle, what's wrong with you all? You cannot do this. You cannot take the citizenship of a person born here and take it away. Again, you are quite split on this. Mike says Supreme Court decided that her citizenship should be revoked. That is the end. Why is this farce allowed to go on? Because we do have appeal courts in this system. Hazel said, who on earth is paying for this person's continued legal appeals? Dawn said, you started your programme talking about referendum. Let the public decide. I mean, really? How well do you think that would be literally having referendums every 5 seconds if we were responsible for making the decisions like that? Would we not? Mike says, absolutely, positively, definitely, no, no, no. Glenn says, this woman should stay in Britain. Really? She will be seen as the poster girl for the number of people who live in our communities who support ISIS. A few of you, again, have that sentiment that I think it was you that were just saying about bring her back into this country and let her face proper justice. I mean, what do we call proper justice?
Well, I think it's about the current justice system and the current court system. Ultimately, I think Peter's absolutely hit the nail on the head here. You can't take away somebody's citizenship without a proper right to a legal trial. And ultimately, we you know, he's absolutely right. You know, we tried IRA terrorists, we try murderers, we try rapists. This individual, Shamima Begum, has committed one of the most horrendous crimes against this country. She is a traitor to this country and should face the consequences in this country to which she was born.
Why should all of these hard-working men and women, why should their tax money be going on putting this lady she doesn't want to be here, apparently. Apparently this country is absolutely appalling, was her mindset once upon a time. So
what's the alternative, though?
I don't care.
Honestly,
I know you might think that I'm a little bit harsh. Not your problem. If you are not a UK citizen, not your problem anymore. So why would I care?
She's currently stateless, though, in a refugee camp, as I understand it. So would one leave her there forever?
Yeah.
How's that in the interest of justice?
Well, do you know what? I imagine, / I hope, that your life, that her life, wherever she's currently living it, is quite unpleasant. And then what might actually happen is that all these people that wander around the streets of the UK getting radicalised, that think it's all right to wander around the streets of UK chanting jihad, jihad, knowing that actually the Met Police will turn a blind eye, making out that it means something else. All those young people, they might actually look at Shamima Begum living this horrendous life in this awful camp somewhere, and it might make them think twice about it. Because all these people that think that the UK is such a horrendous place, leave.
But Michelle,
go somewhere else. That's what I say.
You're advocating punishment without a trial.
No, I'm advocating if you hate this country and you want to blow it to smithereens, guess what? Get on a plane and go and live somewhere else. Maybe my view is a little bit too simple. You tell me, but for now it's all I've got time for. Peter, Reem, thank you for your company. Thank you at home. See you tomorrow.
Hello again, it's Alex Burkill here with your latest GB News weather update. For some, it will be a little bit chilly overnight, but in the south we have some heavy rain arriving. That's in association with an area of low pressure currently just to the southwest, but this is going to skirt its way eastwards along the English Channel as we go through the night into Wednesday. That will then bring a significant amount of rain across southern parts, the heaviest rain likely to be in the south-southeast, and here we could see some disruption to travel, perhaps some localised flooding too. Elsewhere towards the east of Scotland, a bit wet and quite cloudy, but further west, northwest, some clear skies, so turning a little bit chilly. A touch of frost possible across some parts of western Scotland. A very wet start then in the southeast on Wednesday morning could cause some problems during the morning rush hour, but the rain should clear away, and then it's a drier picture across many parts of England, Wales into Northern Ireland as we go into the afternoon, but cloudy and wet across eastern parts of Scotland. Some significant rainfall possible here. Temperatures near normal for the time of year, highs around 14, possibly 15 Celsius. As we look towards Thursday, it's going to be quite an unsettled wet day. We have a band of rain that will push its way northeastwards as we go through the morning. Behind it then, some hefty showers are quite likely. Notice some towards the south coast and perhaps in the far east as well. And it's going to be quite blustery too. The unsettled theme continues as we go through Friday into Saturday, and temperatures likely to be near normal for the time of year.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.